Welcome to Marathon Champions, the podcast where running legends Benji Durden, Bill Rogers, and Ron Tabb share their timeless wisdom on marathon training and inspire listeners with their wealth of experience. These champions continue to impact the running world today.
And where was your base camp? Because you're talking New Orleans and then Atlanta and then Eugene and Boulder.
I eventually went to Denver.
Okay.
Cree got me a house, a English couple who lived in Denver and offered me their basement to live in. If I could give them a little bit in rental money. So I eventually went to Denver.
Did you find altitude training extremely hard? And how long did you stay at altitude?
Well, I lived in Denver for 3 years, but I would go back to New Zealand in the wintertime. So I went back and forth. But, I've had a really good VO2 max. And my coach said to me, in some respects, that apart from the shock of that first race, after that, once I started running, I didn't have an issue at all. No issue whatsoever. And John actually said he never changed my training program from sea level to altitude because I could handle altitude doing the same workouts at altitude.
So do you think Arthur Lydiard, of course, played a huge role in this sport? We all know who he was, the great New Zealand coach who invited Mr. Bowerman from Eugene fame to come down. He saw all these people jogging. Coach Bowerman started American jogging to a considerable extent, and look what's happened. But for you, Anne, it was all good and well until you ran the Cascade runoff. You won the race. You won $10,000. I believe it was the first prize money given to amateurs who want to be professionals in about 80 years, since the days of the 6-day runs at Madison Square Garden.
Jordache had their marathons, which
Yeah.
Tom Fleming won one of those, and I can't remember the other guy's name, but there was some women that did it too, obviously, but their circuit wasn't really, and there were some other weird things out there, but this was the first time we had a circuit of semi-legitimate. I guess legitimate. I shouldn't say semi-legitimate. They were legitimate races. Cascade had a long history already.
Well, you had the professional circuit. You had the professional circuit.
Yeah, that was the ITA. ITA, was it? And Jim Ryan ran on that.
Right.
Yeah.
But
I think
the problem was that was a track circuit and the money wasn't that good.
Yeah.
Well, and I think with Cascade, what it was is that it was all totally out in the open. I mean, I knew what I was getting into. I knew enough. I just didn't expect to win. But I knew exactly what we were up against, and we were going to push the envelope, and openly do what we were going to have to do to try and make it work.
And you were punished, Anne, when you went back to New Zealand. They were extremely strict. They were kind of like the British, where the amateur concept evolved, and which we all hated and fought hard to change, but negotiations went on, I believe, between Olin Cassell and the United States Athletics Federation with the involvement of Frank Shorter and the Bank of Boulder to find a way between a compromise. But you didn't have any compromise. You got slammed by the New Zealand Federation until suddenly they needed you to run in the Commonwealth Games, I believe, in '82.
Yeah, it was well, I'll tell you a funny story about Olin Cassell, and we've been in contact a little, just I don't know, a few years ago, but I remember sitting with him in Denver Airport, and him basically saying to me, this is honestly what he said to me: "You've been a very naughty girl." I mean, can you just and when you think about it, and for me that was just like the administrators in New Zealand. The way
he was similar.
Got talked to down there, and then there was Elvin Chris, and but I can picture that. I can just picture that. You've been a very naughty girl. But anyway, going back to New Zealand, we, the three of us, Alison Rowe and Lorraine Moller and myself, immediately got banned. But that was the international rules, and I think you guys got suspensions, but we got
Well, no, I
international
was banned.
bans.
Alvin
You got
Chris flew
banned.
around the
Okay.
United States to try to keep me from running in any race, and
Okay. So
races
I didn't
ignored
really
him.
see, I didn't really, because I was so new, I was just still dealing with my little world. That's why, you guys, um, if they ever get this Cascade film made, we've all got how we all had to deal with it because we didn't really know. We were going into the unknown and we were all trying
Yes.
to find our own ways. And I had to deal with the New Zealand Association. And and not only that, I had to deal with immigration because by taking that check as a visitor on a visitor's visa, that was illegal. So I practically got deported at the end of 1981. Immigration told me to go back to New Zealand and go to the American embassy and not come back to the United States until I had the right visa to be able to come to the United States to earn prize money. So I had that issue to deal with too. So I go back and they're so bad that they've told my coach John Davies that I'm not even allowed to run the New Zealand track season, and they don't even want me turning up as a spectator. So this was all coming from a race director in England called Andy Norman.
I remember him.
Yeah,
Andy Norman,
Yeah.
all right, one of the guys I was speaking about. So
Andy
he's down
Norman was
there.
the Olin Cassell of England.
Yes.
Yeah.
So he came down and he's bringing the British athletes, and we had at that point some really big international track meets in New Zealand because Walker, Quacks, and Dixon were our heroes, and so they were bringing everybody from Europe down because it was summertime, so they could all come and train in the New Zealand summer and have a great time. And I remember I remember turning up to one of those track meets and him confronting me and telling me how I had destroyed the sport. And you've just destroyed this sport. Well, basically, I destroyed his income, is what he was saying. But
You're right.
yeah, and he hated. He was just he was awful. And he goes, "You shouldn't even be at this track meet. You need to leave." And I mean, he was, and that's a British guy saying it to me. And so anyway, through that time, John, I wasn't allowed to race or anything. So John Davies, he said to me, "Well, Annie, you've got to have a reason why you're down here for. We don't know what the future's going to be. We don't know when you can get back to the United States. Why don't we try and break the world 5,000 meter record?" And I'm like, "Really, John?" And I mean, it was really. I'd watched Greta attempt it and miss it. So heck, Greta's just my idol in terms of Greta can't do it. And he goes, "Yes, I think you can break it. You've got to have a reason to get up each day to keep on training. We don't know what the timeline's going to be, but let's make an attempt at it." So in March of 82, I stepped up. Now the rules were that if you were going to try and break a record, you had to have 4 people in the race total. Well, it was hard to find, the 4 people. Lorraine Moller was willing because she was also banned, and so the 2 of us could race, but we needed 2 more people that were willing to race against us. And of course, the rule was in track and field that they'd be contaminated if they got in the race with us. But we found 2 women, to Barbara Moore. Barbara Moore was the 3rd one, and then a 4th, Debbie Ellsmore, I think it was. So anyway, I break the world record. Well, then they go, "Well, you can't have it because you're a banned athlete. So you're not going to get it."
Oh,
Like, all right, what the heck? I know I did it. Don keeps saying to me, "Well, things are going to get worked out. Things are going to get worked out." But anyway, I came back to the United States because I got the right visa. Race directors didn't care. And that was the year I kind of went on a rampage of winning and won every single race and broke course records and was having the time of my life. And then John said to me, "Well, I want you to run in the Commonwealth Games in Brisbane in October of 82. And I go, "No, I don't want to run track anymore, John." And he goes, "Yeah, sure you can. No New Zealand woman's ever won a track gold medal. And this is your chance, and you need to do it for the country, for your family, for me. You got to come and do it." And I go, "No, don't want to. I want to stay here, run the roads." He goes, "No, come on, please." And I said to him, "If you can prove to me that I can train for a 3,000 meters at the same time I'm road racing and get the workouts to correspond, I'll do it. But I'm not going to give up any American road race. And so we did, but I was still banned. And I flew to Australia 2 weeks before the Commonwealth Games, still banned by the international track community. And the ban got lifted with a week to go, and I got presented with my world record plaque, which is sitting right in front of me as I speak to you.
Did
But yeah, but
did New Zealand officials ever apologize to you or say, well, I mean, how did it, so everything then sort of became more professional in New Zealand as was evolving in the US? They had a trust fund system briefly here, but the struggle to become professional by track athletes and marathoners and road racing, I don't think the general public has much of an idea about this. And that's
no,
why
with
it's
New
important.
Zealand, well, the funny thing was in New Zealand was, Alison gave her money back. So Alison never really had any issues. Lorraine put hers into the trust fund in Boulder. I did a quick switch around. I never put any of my money into anything. I just went and invested it myself. So I didn't do it because
Yeah.
the New Zealand folks didn't know what to do with us. And so we were basically able to say, well, leave it alone. The United States will help us out. So we didn't actually have to give them any of our money. They were so confused about everything. We managed to, pull the wool over their eyes in some respects. So so we got out of that part, right? They were just trying to keep us from running, but they never got our money. And so they, to this day, they never did. And I'm not even sure they set up any trust funds for anybody.
What's ironic is the struggle that the athletes had to go through, and even the people who had succeeded in the past, whether they were officials or they were agents, someone like Andy Norman or Olin Cassell, were simply working along the rules that have been established years and decades before, and so hard to change international rules.
Well, but the other thing
efforts
is
of the
they were
athletes.
breaking the rules themselves. I mean, Olin took money when he was a 400-meter runner under the table. Andy Norman, I mean, he made a living breaking the rules,
Yeah.
paying out money. I mean, these guys were your major hypocrites, and they were using the rules in their own favor. And that was the other thing that was why we were fighting this, is the rules were used as a cudgel to make us do what they wanted us to do as opposed to helping the sport. I mean, the best example I have when people ask what was going on is Dwight Stone's getting on to the Tonight Show and high jumping in his street clothes and getting $500 to be on the Tonight Show. He wasn't getting $500 to high jump. He was getting $500 because that was what everybody that came on the Tonight Show got. And they used that against Dwight to force him to get into some meets they wanted him to get into.
Yeah.
You know more about it than I do, Benji, in a certain
Well,
way.
yeah, partially because I've studied this stuff with Don and others. I mean, we were trying to understand how the sport had been corrupted so much, but it's always been that way, and it's still that way when you get right down to it.
But it's good that Nike stepped up for the Cascade runoff.
Yes.
This is an important meet, and that the
Yep.
athletes gambled and said, I'm going to try it. I didn't go in 110%.
No, but you were
out a
still
lot.
making a very strong living under the table, and there was no good reason for you to take and throw that all away. But you supported us. You
Yeah.
were there financially supporting us as well
I had a
as
big
you,
mouth.
huh?
I had a
Well,
big
yeah, but you also you put some seed money in to pay for some of our expenses. I mean, it was you definitely were part of the process. You weren't sidewalk quarter.
Yeah, I mean, we all went into it absolutely with the unknown, and we all came from different perspectives on it. I mean, to be honest with me, is first of all, yes, I wanted the chance to earn a living out of my talent, but the big reason was I was out of money and I couldn't work in the United States. So unless I managed to earn some more money to stay here a bit longer, I was on a plane either back to New Zealand or England. I was done. So if I had not earned that money at Cascade, I was done. I had no money. I had no way to earn a living here.
What a change. I mean, Anne, I wonder what you think today as we sit here. That was in 1981, 40 years ago. And with the amounts of money that is going to the athletes today, to me, it's still not enough. I want to
Well,
see the first $1 million first place prize given out to a man and a woman at the Boston Marathon or the New York City Marathon or London, one of these hotshot marathons that make tons of money. Maybe so what do you think of that?
Well, I look back, I truly look back on the 80s as that we were, it was a great decade. And
Yeah.
I, as a so-called foreigner, because I didn't become a US citizen until 95, I was earning six figures in the 80s.
Yeah.
And that was actually not with a big shoe company. I was smart enough, I'll take a little credit. I was smart enough with how confident I was in my road racing to actually negotiate a contract with Nike that was all bonus related. And I set it up where if I had repeat wins, if I broke course records, and that kind of stuff, and first, second, and third, and so I was able to sit down with my coach every January and work out where I was going to race, and I never deviated from my plan. So that's why I had 7 Bloomsdays, 7 Revcos as it was then, 6 Virginia Milers. I had negotiated my Nike contract to get bonuses for repeat wins and course records. So even though I had a decent retainer, which my largest one with Nike was $40,000 a year, I was, and I was still getting appearance fees because I would go out into the public. So I was negotiating, going to the races and going there 3 or 4 days ahead of time and going out and doing PR for the race. So I was earning my income. I was smart enough to do it in such a way that it was coming from different avenues. And
Yeah.
I wasn't relying on a shoe company retainer. I was relying on my ability to perform.
That's pretty interesting. I never did any negotiations. I briefly had an agent when IMG was thinking that track and field was really going to go pro and it'd be like tennis or golf and big money was going to happen. And that was pretty amazing to be treated like more than we were treated as quote amateurs. But I just think the sport is in a better place today than it's ever been. But I do like what Seb Coe did with a $50,000 first prize at the Olympic Games for all gold medalists in athletics, which is track and field to Americans. So that's a great start, you
It's
know.
a start. Go ahead, Benji.
Well, the thing is, you guys are missing out on the fact that we had a better development system back then. I mean, the young developing runners could get free shoes by just being pretty good, not great, but pretty good. And
Yeah.
the money trickled down better than it does now. Now, I mean, Noah Droughty here in Boulder, he doesn't have a shoe contract. He's a 209 flat marathoner, no shoe contract. He can't make a living running. He's basically not running very much. He started back, but that's at a 209 marathoner that doesn't have an income from running.
No, you're exactly right, Benji. In that respect, it's not filtering down at all. I guess what I'm saying is that I was just fortunate to be good right at the right moment.
Yeah, and we all were. I mean,
Yeah.
we're sitting here. Basically, our lives have been about running. None of us, I think, grew up thinking that's what was going to be the case.
Oh,
And yet, I was going to be a scientist, but my life is about running, and all of my life has been about running. Once I found that niche,
yep.
but I don't know that would be the case if I started today.
I agree. I have said this many times when I get asked the question, is no young American runner at the age of early 20s, because I was 25 when I came here, none of them can have the career that I had. They all have to work somehow full-time or part-time, or get some help from family or whatever, because the money's not there. Because I was able to just suddenly immediately switch to being a full-time athlete, get all the care I needed. never have to, you're exactly right, never have to work in the real world again.
Yeah.
But they do. But they do.
Yeah, I mean, it part of it is, you know, the prize money you know, we had a circuit of races where prize money and appearance money, it was all over the country, and there were dozens and dozens of races. Now they're big races like Boston and Houston and Chicago, New York. I mean, there's big money there, but you've got to be already pretty good to get that
Well,
money.
one aspect, Benji and Ron, which is very, very unique, is that it's I think pretty much Ethiopia and Kenya kind of has cornered the top finishes. Let's face it, at all
Yeah.
races, this is just a fact. And nothing wrong with that. They are hardworking, very tough people, and poverty will drive you, as we have all been a bit poor at some times, but not as poor as
Yeah.
athletes from Ethiopia or Kenya, where per capita incomes are $2,000 a year. So I think that's a major factor. And but I think there's many of the races have American purses, and perhaps they do in Europe or other countries, you know, for their people from their country. I don't know. I think that our sport has been gigantically impacted in that way, which is kind of interesting. It's unique. Of course, there's other parts to that story, that not all of these great athletes are totally great on their own. And you know what I'm saying. So I think that's always been an issue in all sports, but it is an issue in ours as well. And it's kind of interesting. I saw in the news the other day, the Ethiopian woman who won the Boston Marathon 10 years ago still hasn't received her first place prize money from the BAA of $100,000. So which is crazy, because they have $27 million in their bank account.
Well, I'll tell you, you know, something that I find, it might sound like I'm hitting at some of my really great race director friends, but this is reality. So I won Bloomsday 7 times, from 81 to 91. And once it had prize money, it was $7,500 prize money. Cascade was $10,000 first up, and I won that 3 times. Cleveland had, I think, about $10,000 first prize for the 10K back in the 80s.
Yeah.
You look at those races now in terms of inflation and these young athletes and the fact that the Africans are coming and taking these races. First of all, the money at Bloomsday is exactly the same as it was in 1982.
Yeah.
Cascade doesn't exist. And I believe first place in the 10K in Cleveland is $1,500.
It's true.
So that's why we've gone backwards. And so what I look at is these races used us, and I mean that in a positive way. It's not negative, but they promoted us so well and created such an atmosphere that the media, my scrapbooks, are not little pages and 5th and 6th pages of the sports section. I've got front pages of the Cleveland Plain Dealer, the Spokane Review, the New York Times, the Boston Globe, where our sport was covered on the female side, on the front pages of the major national newspapers. And all those huge events that now have 30, 40, 50,000 participants, they used us, I mean it in a positive way. We benefited too. It grew these races into these huge events that have this population of people running, but did not continue to benefit the folks up front that helped build their events.
Yeah. I think it's all true, but fascinating to see the changes. Athletes, however, are faster than ever. Are you boggled, Anne, as you were a world record holder yourself? Of course, we know it's a good part the shoes today, you know, and Nike led the way on that, I think. And I'm all in favor of seeing efforts, money put into designing better and better shoes, because we all know that some of the shoes going way back, even before our time, you know, were not so good. And what do you think of the I guess some of the shoes say are worth 3% or 4% improvement of your times. So
I guess if you, you know, I laughingly say I look at these shoes and I was like, man, I'd fall off them. I mean, they look like they're so
I
high.
do too.
So I'm not sure I could have run in them, but I don't even want to try and start. Well, 3 or 4% on someone like me gets me, you know, I'd never considered myself a marathoner. So let's take the marathon out of it, because I hated marathons and I hated training for them. But I was also very, very concerned about my feet, in terms of my history, that trying to be a marathon was asking for too much on them. So that aside, you take my 10K time and put 4%, or the 5K, you know, you're getting down there, with some of those times. I think we've learned much more about, you know, training and diet and all that kind of stuff too. The tracks are faster. So, you know, technology has definitely come into our sport. And the fact that women were behind the men in terms of learning or getting the experiences of, we're so much later in getting the experiences of running the longer distances. So that's taken a while for women to realize they can do it. And I think one factor on the women's side is they're now realizing it, because folks like me and Lorraine Moller, who ran the 800 and 1500 meters as youngsters, because that's all we could do, we managed to get ourselves. Greta's the same. So we got the opportunity to run the longer distances. So now what you're seeing is these female runners that are starting off being great 1500-meter runners. And then they're being coached and learning the fact that they can take that 1500-meter speed into the 10,000 meters. But we didn't even know that in our era. It was trial and error in terms of going those distances. But now you're seeing some of these that are starting off as 800, 1500-meter runners and are training themselves to go the longer distances.
And what about your race in Idaho? I don't know too much about it. Is it a woman's race, or is it just a big road race you started?
It's both. It was both. When I started it in 1993, it was a 5K for women. Because in 1993, I realized that so many women over the age of 40, 50, 60, and 70 were not coming out and entering road races. And so I wanted to prove to women that if they came out, they were either too shy, or they considered themselves too overweight or unfit or too old. They weren't doing it. So I wanted to create a 5K that welcomed everybody, all sizes, shapes, abilities. And so that's how I founded it in 93. And it grew to 17,000 women only in 5 years. It was absolutely spectacular. It was an amazing event. And actually, once again, in terms of our sport and people helping each other and friendships and everything, Cree Kelly came over, and because people in Boise, Idaho knew nothing about a road race, didn't know how to put a road race on. So Cree came over and brought his team to teach. Don Cardon sent his finish line folks down from Spokane to teach local folks how to administer an event. So we grew very quickly. So then it got to the 10-year anniversary, and you know, I'd married and I'd moved here to Indiana, and I realized that there's no way I can keep leading this thing in Boise. I can certainly be part of it. And I just thought, well, what am I going to do? So I went to the major hospital in Boise, and I said to them, you know, this is a great event. I can't lead it anymore. Do you guys want to put your name on it and have it as your signature event? And to their credit, they did. So we went another 10 years as a women's only. And on the 20th anniversary, we'd gone from 17,000 to 8,000. And, you know, for someone like me, I'm competitive. They all think it's still wonderful, and it probably was. But I'm watching the world of women's running change so much, where all these events around the United States have over 55% are now women in everything, the marathon, the long distance, triathlons. So what we set out to do in 93 had been achieved. So I suggested that they change it to encompass the whole community. And so now it's an event that's a 5K, 10K, and half marathon. and it's welcome to the entire community. It closed down for 2 years because of COVID, but it's now back up to 14,000.
It's a beautiful city, Boise.
Oh yeah, yep.
I've been there a few years ago, and it's like in a little valley or something like that. It's a little nirvana or something.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Yeah, but they didn't know anything about road racing. But yeah, once again, I called, what's the word you say? You call in your chips with people, and getting Don to send his folks down. I mean, it was brilliant.
So you gave back, Anne. Here you are, what you went through, and you gave back in this powerful way where people's lives, their health and fitness, which is a major issue, I believe, in the US. And our sport is situated really to deal with these issues. And what I wonder, my brother and I started a Jingle Bell Run way back in '77, and that's still kind of existing, but I know other Jingle Bell Runs have started since then. Benji and Ron, have you been involved in things like that? Benji was
back when I was just beginning to be an elite runner. I helped start the Athens Track Club at the University of Georgia, and we put on a bunch of races, and I was involved, and we had ribbons for the prizes, and we made our own ribbons. And I've still got a singlet that's actually just an old undershirt that we screen printed Athens Track Club on. But I've been involved on both sides of the sport for most of my serious racing years. I wasn't, because you don't have the energy to do anything other than train and race. But Amy and I, that was our living for a couple of decades, timing races.
Yeah.
Putting on races during that period, we helped with races to make them
Did
work.
you do Boulder? Did you time Boulder?
We moved out here because Bosley wanted me to run Boulder, and he said he'd put me up to train at altitude so I'd be comfortable. And Amy ended up being part of the staff at Boulder, and we've worked with Boulder in some aspect many times. Now that we're retired, we're not doing that anymore. But we were, and Amy was part of the Peachtree when we were in Atlanta. You were the water. I call it Finish area bartender. But she was the Finish area bartender. She just water, but you had to have a whole lot of water for the Finish of Peachtree. One year I was in charge of getting the T-shirts screen printed. Galloway wanted. I was working for Phidippides, and Galloway wanted the T-shirt job, so he bid and got it, and I was in charge of making sure the T-shirts got screen printed. I ran like crap that year, but breathing screen printing fumes were not the best thing for training, but we got it done. But we've seen both sides of the sport, and it is part of our lives.
It's a lot of work to put on a race, I think.
And I don't think people appreciate how hard it is. I mean, they don't see the things you have to deal with the city, you have to deal with the police, you have to deal with the transportation. I mean, there's so many moving parts, and any one of those moving parts fails, the whole thing's screwed up.
And runners can
be I always say I stole everything from all the race directors I learned from.
Well, yeah, but that's how it's always been. I mean, you learn from each other.